Hello, hello. Hello, everyone. There we go. Stand up here, Bruce. Anyways, welcome. My name's Jeff Vaccaro. I'm the president of Olivenhain Town Council. We are proud to co-host this event with the Fire Safe Council, Sarah and the Fire Safe Council. As a reminder, there's restrooms behind me. You may go through the camera view. If you can try to stop that, that would be awesome. And then it doesn't look like we're super full capacity tonight, but we may close the doors a little bit later for warmth as well as capacity reasons. And then the last thing is the Olivenhain Town Council is a nonprofit 501c3. As many of you are members, we appreciate your membership. If you're not, I'm sure you all live within the rocks is what we call it. We would desperately love your membership, olivenhain.org/membership. If you want to go there, this is how we maintain all of these grounds. These are privately held grounds. These are not public grounds. So we and the board all have a lot to do with rentals and other things here. Finally, I would want to acknowledge my board members here, Scott Woodward behind the laptop with me, and then Mark Mayer by the door. I appreciate it. Here's Sarah from the Fire Safe Council.
Sorry, I need a crib. Is this working? Okay, I can't hear it, so I need a crib sheet. I reiterate everything that Jeff said, including joining the OTC, because they are responsible for maintaining and stewarding this amazing property, and I think it's a real treasure for our community. And they're also a wonderful partner for the Fire Safe Council. So many of you may have gotten my emails begging you to stay home and live stream it, because we had over 150 RSVPs for this room, and there was no way we could accommodate everybody. So thank you to everybody who agreed to do the live stream at home. We were getting reservations from Rancho Santa Fe, from Southwest Escondido, and it was just like kind of out of control. So it's really no overstatement to say that we were flabbergasted by the response to this. Some of us who've been doing this for a while remember events here where very few people showed up. So the way this came about is that I started getting more and more emails from people as the LA fires were going on, from people who were very worried about our situation. Some of you know I grew up in Pasadena, and the neighborhood I grew up in was one of those affected by the Eaton fire. It lost 143 homes. So this is personal for me, and it hit very close to home. I realized that we needed an event, because just my randomly answering emails wasn't going to do the job. And in 2019, there was a similar event to this one, and it was very well attended. So that was what I had in mind when I happened to run into Jordan Villagomez outside Vaughn's, and I hit him up for it, and he said, "Send me an email." And I did, and the response was, "We're swamped too, but if you organize it, we'll be there." So from that point, I contacted Carolina with the Sheriff's Department, and then Justin with San Diego Humane, and here we have our event. And before I contacted any of them, I actually asked Jeff if the OTC wanted to co-sponsor this, and he jumped on it, and so did their board. So anyway, the OFSC's mission is education, outreach, and facilitation to increase wildfire safety in Olivenhain. And with that in mind, I wanted to tell you about a couple of events we have coming up that might interest you. First one is we have a neighborhood ambassador program where we have point people in different neighborhoods who are kind of liaisons to the Fire Safe Council. It's the same model as a block captain for Neighborhood Watch, or a precinct captain in a political campaign. And there can be more than one in a neighborhood. So we're up to, well, before I talked to James and Mary Jam, we were at 17. Now we're up to, I guess, 19. And we have 4 in Copper Crest alone. So if there is already a neighborhood ambassador in your neighborhood, there's no reason there can't be another, or even more than one or two others, because you can share the work and you can share ideas. I think it's really interesting to have that feedback. You don't have to do this on your own. Anyway, on March 19th at 7 o'clock, we're having an ambassador meeting here, and we have a speaker who is Thomas Schutz of CAL FIRE, and he is the San Diego County liaison to Firewise USA, and that's what he's going to talk about, because we're hoping that the ambassadors will lead the charge to start pursuing Firewise USA recognition in their neighborhoods. And Lou, where did you go? Oh, could you stand up, please, so people can see you? This is Lou Obertrice. He is our neighborhood ambassador coordinator. And if you're interested, you can talk to him. You can email him through the links that you find on our website. And we are going to have a dedicated ambassador web page on our site, but we don't have it yet. Anyway, that's at 7 o'clock on March 19th. Thomas is a great guy, and I really think that you'll enjoy it if you come. And you don't have to be an ambassador or even a prospective ambassador to come. Just come and find out more about Firewise. The other event we're having is
she's streaming live with us, so I'm telling you got to hold the mic closer. So that's she's on there, so thank you for her for being there. I just want to say thank you. I know a lot of you know my history in Olivenhain. My family's been here. They were original settlers here, and I have a plot in the cemetery. Who knows that there's a cemetery here in Olivenhain? Yeah, a lot of people don't know, right? Go down Manchester, make a right on Colony Terrace. Up on the left corner there, you'll see a cemetery that has my family in there. So this place means a lot to me. The safety of Olivenhain means a lot to me, and it's Olivenhain, not Hain. Okay, my family would beat me up if I said it the other way, so just letting you guys know. But it means a lot to me, and I'm honored to be the fire chief of this community. I grew up here. My family's been here forever. I wish I still lived here, but my wife won that battle. We live in Carlsbad next to her family, so that happens, right? But again, thank you for having us. We appreciate it. Hopefully we give you guys a presentation that you can take some information home, make some changes today or tomorrow, maybe not tonight, but tomorrow, to make your home safer, your yard safer, and then the community at large safer. When you guys do your part, everybody wins, right? So I'm going to turn it over to Marie now, who's going to do the introductions. I could do that, but you don't want to hear me talking the whole time. So this is Marie Jones-Kirk. She's our emergency manager.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you to all of you for being here this evening, for your commitment to your community. And one thing I have to say about Chief, under his leadership, it really inspires us that work in the fire department and those community partners to really look out for what is best for our community. So thank you for having us here this evening. So some of you may say, what's an emergency manager do? So my role as the emergency manager for the city is to really think about the readiness of the community, from anything from writing or updating emergency plans to making sure that the city staff is ready for when we have a disaster emergency through training, making sure our emergency operations center is ready. Also working with community. This is one of my favorite things that I get to do, is looking at the readiness of our residents and our community members, and then also looking at those things that we might need resources-wise for the city. So I'm really proud to be here this evening, but I'm also really proud of the team that I get to present with tonight. So I'm going to turn that over to my team member, Jordan, and let him introduce.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jordan Villagomez. I'm the fire marshal for Encinitas, Solana Beach, and Del Mar presently.
Good evening. Mike Davis, Sheriff's Lieutenant out of our North Coastal Station. I applaud each of you from coming out, and those that are joining us online. I think you're going to receive a vast amount of information that you're going to be able to take away from this. The technology that's out there and the information sharing that we're able to use today is like it never has been before. And I appreciate everyone that's online, like I said, because even though we're here in person, a lot of the best practices that law and fire uses that we're going to use right here in this jurisdiction, we use it the same way across the county. So in this San Diego County, Law and Fire has a great working relationship. We train together, and we do this year round, and you're going to see that in the presentation. And again, thank you. I have a feeling that you're going to learn a lot tonight, and I appreciate each of you for coming out and joining us online.
Hi, everyone. I'm Justin Stillions. I'm the Lieutenant Animal Emergency Response Manager for the San Diego Humane Society. San Diego Humane Society is your animal services contracted service provider here for the city of Encinitas and in Olivenhain. I'm just going to go over some considerations for animal evacuation for both livestock and companion animals. It's a really important because one of the largest reasons for people being reluctant to evacuate in an emergency is fear about being unable to evacuate and house their animals. So I'll provide you some information on that.
All right, thank you. Okay, it's going to test my coordination skills, doing the microphone and this at the same time. And, okay, oh, hold on. All right, so let me just kind of go over what we're going to be talking about this evening. Now, for some of you, this could be review. You've, heard, received Sarah's emails, you've attended other events here, maybe here in Olivenhain or at, with the city. But for those, maybe this is new material. My goal at the end of the evening is, as I like to say anytime I do public education is that you'll become your own emergency managers. Emergency managers for your family, maybe at work, maybe a place of worship, maybe you have community, groups that you're involved with. So you're going to learn about the defensible space and home hardening. We'll talk about fire preparedness, that goes beyond just do you have a plan and a go kit. We'll talk about emergency evacuations, which is, and one of the things you're going to hear tonight, and actually Lieutenant Davis touched on this, is we work together as a team. So you'll see that throughout our presentations this evening, is that really that team approach on how we approach from prevention to preparedness, mitigation, response, and even that recovery piece. And then I'll do a wrap up at the end. But I'm going to turn this over to Jordan now.
Thank you, Marie. And thank you guys all for being here. We're going to go over a lot of topics. And just so you know, all the information that I'm going to talk about, we're also going to have resources for. We got these new flyers that Marie has made that kind of wrap up all the defensible space information in a really easy to read pamphlet. And then also we have QR codes to our website and other resources. So if you don't have to take a lot of notes. We're going to supply you with resources. Again, my name is Jordan Villagomez. I'm the fire marshal right now. A little bit about me. I have about 12 years experience. I'm a third generation in my family in the fire service. My grandfather was in forestry. My dad retired from CAL FIRE, and then I tried to avoid as best I could, and here I am. So I'm really grateful to be in this community and to serve you guys. Working under Chief Gordon has been great, good breath of fresh air, and we're starting to get a lot of momentum right now. Like you said, a lot of good things to come. So moving forward, I'm going to go over defensible space and home hardening. I think everyone's probably seen this. This is the very high fire hazard severity maps. Say that 5 times fast. This is the map, the last one that's adopted that is applicable right now. If you guys have been paying attention to any kind of state news, this is getting updated. So we're going to be getting the new maps at the end of this month. Once we get them, we have to do a little bit of a review in-house. There's not anything we can really change. We're basically just verifying what the state's giving us because they do an overhead map overlay. They have all the data, scientific data to back it up. So once we get them, we're required to adopt them within 120 days. So keep a lookout for that. We'll be coming out with more information on that too. So wildfire threat to structures. Why do structures burn? There's a 0 to 5 foot. We're going to talk a little deeper about that. Ember production from the fire, as well as flame impingement, which is which is how close it gets to the house, direct flame impingement, and then radiant heat. Depending on what's on fire, the amount of fuel in there is going to generate a certain amount of heat, which is going to push that heat towards its surroundings and then catch them on fire as well. So we're going to go over different things on what you can do to protect your home. Fire behavior, like I talked about, the amount of the fuel types around your homes, the moisture content of the fuel. We've been in a drought for off and on in California for the last 20 years or so. The topography or slopes, because fire goes uphill. Current weather patterns, and then other factors like history. Defensible space, defensible working area. This is in regards to when our resources show up. It's not, the defensible space is great for your homes to provide defensible space for your homes, but also helps us work. So when we show up, we'll go into detail later on how that affects operations showing up to your house or to certain areas and gives them a better chance on fighting the fire. So here's a good example. You can tell, here's some guys right here working. The flames are in the back. There's a decent defensible space, which creates a fire break and lets them pull hose and not have to be so close to the structure where the flames are going to come. Defensible space is a definition: natural landscaped area around the structure, maintained and designated to reduce fire danger. We're going to go into the zones more specifically, but that's the general terminology. Working area goals: we want to reduce the flame lengths that can come in contact with things like your structure or furniture outside. We want to reduce the radiant heat, give firefighters the room to advance hose lines, as well as provide a safe area for them to defend your home if they have to. Oop. So defensible space zones, this is in the flyer detailed, so like I said, you don't have to take a bunch of notes on this, and we have a bunch of resources on our website as well, and it goes into detail about each zone and what the requirements and recommendations are to help you provide safety for your home and protect yourselves. So there's 0 to 5 feet. If anyone's been paying attention right now, Governor Newsom came down with an executive order, and in that executive order is the 0 to 5 foot zone, which is called Zone 0. This was always, not always, this was in the code for the last couple years in Government Code 51182, but it was a recommendation, not a requirement. The Board of Forestry, during COVID, some things, I think they dispersed. A bunch of the members had to leave for different reasons, so that part never got adopted. It was always an option, so we'd always recommend it to people, but we can't require it. After Palisades, Governor Newsom made that a new requirement. So now, going forward, that's going to be one of the things that we have enforcement to do. So the other ones before that were just the 1 foot zone, which included the 0 to 5, the intermediate zone, which is to 30 feet, and then the extended zone, which is 30 to 100. And we're going to go into depth about all of them. So 0 to 5, like we were talking about, is a recommendation, and now it's being a requirement. So what does that mean? That means within 5 feet, all combustibles have to be removed. That includes mulch, patio furniture, stacks of wood. It even going into the details with it. I was on a meeting last week, the WUI committee for California, for the southern section at least. They talked about people were bringing up questions about it, and they said, well, what about if it's a tree and it's a large tree? Tree is fuel, so that's it counts. So that's one of the things that has to be removed. Other things too, that also includes what are the like the fake shutters on the outsides of the windows. Those have to be non-combustible now. This is only, I should reiterate, these are the only requirements in the very high fire hazard severity zone. Going forward, once the new maps get adopted, they're going to be including the high and the very high, and then those are going to be changing depending on the fire modeling. So all that stuff will be updated. Other things in the 0 to 5 foot zone, we're going to talk about attic vents, ember resistant, and mesh no larger than 1/8. That's probably the easiest number one thing that I recommend to everybody. It's relatively cheap. They make retrofits. You can buy them at Lowe's and Home Depot as long as they say ember resistant and they can meet that size. Then they're going to help protect your home because you can do all the defensible space you can around your area, but depending on the weather and if there's a large fire like the poinsettia, the embers are going to travel super long distances. There was measurements from poinsettia that they were going up to 2 to 5 miles. So providing defensible space is great, and that's something we want you guys to do to give you your best chances. But the number one thing you can do to protect your house is the ember vents, because if you can provide defensible space, then the embers can still go into the attic space through those vents, and then your house can burn down from the attic space or the footings underneath as well. So that's kind of an overview of Zone 0. It talks about rain gutters and also clearing out like pine needles and like leaves and stuff like that. So yeah, here's the vent news. Here's some different types. Like I said, you can buy retrofit ones to go behind it. I think I saw recently they make like little cups that go in these that just have screens on them, so you can just like pop them in. But yeah, and then there's a gable vent up here at the top. They make ones that you can just bolt on from the inside. I actually installed 2 gable vents at my house last year. Those are the main. I have 2 of them on each side of my house. So there's an example of those. Before I go forward, one of the resources we have, I believe it's on our website. I'll have to double check, but there should be a link on our website that talks about low-cost retrofit, and there's some really good items in there that you can do to help protect your home. So if you can check out the QR codes and the pamphlets, it'll take you to that. 0 to 5, we talked about the wood mulch next to the house. One of the requirements that came down 2 years ago was AB 38, Assembly Bill 38. Once that bill passed, all homes located in the very high fire hazard severity zone that sell, we have to go and look at and inspect, and then give them a piece of paper saying if they have good defensible space or not. And then it also has it's a real estate disclosure form, like when you're in a flood zone. And one of the things on there that we have to check is construction, and one of them is one of the items. It's not a how you say it. It's not like it's not a fail for the inspection, but it basically lets the purchaser know what's on the house and like what's there. One of the things on there that we have to mark is mulch next to the home. And here's an example. This is out by the border of Carlsbad after Poinsettia. We went out and walked a bunch of the hills after that fire, and we're checking how it burned. And this is one of the areas that we came upon. So we took this picture when that happened. Me and the prevention team. So you can totally tell like where it came through. This area right here transitions to rock. So this is all wood mulch right here. Some of the other things that it talked about it might be the next slide. Let me check. Yeah. One of the other things it talks about in the form, the AB 38 form, is rain gutters having the covers on them. Now, one of the requirements for Zone 0 is you're supposed to have covers over your rain gutters so that the leaves and pine needles can't like go inside them. So this is actually out here in Olivenhain, probably when I first started, like 8 or 9 years ago. And then clearing the roof alleys. That's another really good tip for the 0 to 5. We want to cut the trees back 10 feet from the chimney and not overhang the roof, because if they're overhanging the roof or close to the roof, then the leaves are going to pile in there. And if there's a fire event, embers are going to travel really far. They can land on your roof, start that on fire, and then your roof's on fire. Let me see. I think we covered all that. Okay, next zone, intermediate zone. This one is area supposed to be irrigated, landscaped, so that's watered and everything's alive. Anything in this zone that isn't alive, that's dead or dying, is supposed to be removed. We want to keep areas around solar panels clear. Like I said, it's irrigated, so there should be sprinklers. We want to provide clear driveway. Usually that 30 feet encompasses the driveway. If there's a lot of overhang there, and there's some kind of event or emergency response, we want to make sure our apparatus can get there. Maintain 10 feet away from the chimney, like I said before. That's still in the past the 0 to 5. Then we want to prune trees 6 feet from the ground. Those are called ladder fuels. If branches are hanging low from the trees and there's a grass fire, it can go up the tree like a ladder. So we want to cut trees 6 feet from the ground, the limbs 6 feet from the ground. So, and then this illustration is in our handouts as well. You can see the red zone right there, 0 to 5, and then here's the intermediate. And then we're going to get into the next zone. The extended zone, 30 to 100. This area usually causes the most questions that we get from the public, and probably concern from who we talk to the most. The code talks about 100 feet defensible space. Some people don't have 100 feet, so then what? The code reads it's 100 feet or to property line, whichever is closer. So if you don't have 100 feet, then it's just to your property line. And then the way the code talks about it is that you're responsible for your defensible space on your property. So your neighbor's not required to do that extra. If you have 70 feet to your property line and you don't have a full 100, they're not required to do the extra 30. That just means that we can't enforce that. We always encourage everybody to be good neighbors, and the first thing I do when I get a complaint from someone is I have you talk to your neighbor. Talk to them, make them cookies. I barbecue, so I usually bring meat over to people. If you're not into that and you're a vegan, I also grill cactus, nopales, so I'll do that too, make some tacos. Say, hey, what's up, man? Your orange trees are overhanging my yard, and they're dropping stuff, and now I got rats. Like, can you help me out? I always encourage that. I grew up in a small town. I should have mentioned that in my intro. I grew up in Ramona, and I saw the 03 fires come over the hill from Verona. So that kind of sparked my intro into this field in general. But so I know the rural communities. I know the limitations of roads. I seen it, and I grew up with it. So yeah, this area, like I said, is probably the most contentious. It says not every property has 100 feet. We want to reiterate the importance of the 0 to 5, because that's the reason why they put it in there, and the reason why they're requiring it now is because the science has said that if you eliminate those fuels from around your structures in that zone, that's the best chances you have to go forward. And a bunch of that data came out of the Paradise Fire. So this other zone, just to get more detailed, in the 30 to 100 feet, the vegetation doesn't have to be removed. Dead or dying should be removed, and then it's just thinning of the vegetation. So it's like every third plant, or you can have groups of certain plants or trees that are alive with spacing like 20, 25 feet. So, and that's another question we get, like, oh, well, they have to clear all that. I'm like, no, we don't have to clear it. They just have to thin it out. We don't want people to just start cutting a bunch of stuff down like that, because it can actually create natural fire breaks depending on how it's designed. So another important point about that second zone. So going forward, so here's some more stuff on vegetation management. The 3 R's. We want to remove, reduce, and then replace it. Remove all the dead or dying. Get the areas around the 0 to 5 foot. We don't want anything to touch the structure, obviously, because that's going to create flame impingement. In that second zone, intermediate zone, we want to reduce. Thin out, prune the trees, cut them up 6 feet, eliminate ladder fuels, and then reduce the amount of the group trees like I was talking about. Then we're going to replace it. When we get new development in the city and it's located in the very high fire hazard severity zone, we have to do a landscape plan, and we have to verify the plants they're planting and that they're spaced properly, and all that stuff gets evaluated. So, but if you're not doing a project, you can always do it yourself. Obviously, drought tolerant helps, so you don't have a high water bill. Fire resistant if you can, and then ground cover, low growing shrubs, things like that. Okay, we're gonna get into a couple other different things like fire access. Fire access along driveways, like we talked about in the intermediate zone. It's important not just for us to have access, but working area around our vehicles. If the road, depending on some of the roads in like Cardiff and Leucadia, they're existing non-conforming from when the county was in charge before we incorporated in '86. A lot of those roads are different standards, but the width is the width, and sometimes we can't get more than that, but we do the best we can. And but it's important to, when we have access, if it's 15, 16 feet, that we want more than that, because number one, it's gonna constrain our efforts and make us work slower when the firefighters show up. Number two, they have to connect the hoses to the side, and it takes 6 feet for the hose to make a 45-degree turn. So all that stuff is stuff that we look at, and then depending on height of the building, if they have to put the ladder up, all those are factors. So you want to make sure that we can keep things away from the edge of the road for fire access, and it protects our guys at the same time. Minimum vertical clearance for anywhere, not just high fire, is 13'6", and that is the minimum height just so our apparatus can get through there. That's for the ladder truck and the engine, like here. This is right down here on 8th Street. There's a road that doesn't connect. That's an old road, and I had them drive it. Hey, drive it and see if you can make it. They did, but that was one of the complaints I handled probably like 5 or 6 years ago. But yeah, so really important to keep things trimmed away from the driveways, which brings us to structured triage. In the event of an emergency wildfire, this is a triage card. What's it called? WUI card. Thank you. So this is a basic card that the firefighters are going to use to see if the area, the access point, or the house is worth defending. We're not going to put ourselves in danger. The firefighters, depending on where they're from, they're going to evaluate it and say, does it have adequate engine access? Can we see the address numbers? Is there a water source? Do they have defensible space? And are there civilians present? So that's going to gauge, that's the information that they need to use to either go in or not go in. Obviously, if there's civilians present, that's going to change the dynamic if it has to be a rescue or something like that. But look at it right there, 100 feet defensible space. That's a box that they're going to circle or X out. So if you don't have that, you're already one down on the card. And then address numbers, and then water source, and then access. I think this is off Boomin. Sure.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit on the operations side. Jordan does a great job of explaining it, but I want to make sure I send home the message that if you don't do your job, we're not going to come do it for you. Okay? If you got, I think the saying is help us help you. The health and safety of the firefighters is the number one thing for me. And if we're in a spot where we can take some time and the fire's far away and we have a WUI card up here that says non-defensible, we're still probably going to go in there, help create a defensible space or do some work for you. But at the end of the day, when the fire's coming and you didn't clear your property, we're not going to go put the lives of our firefighters in a position where they could lose it for someone who did not do the right defensible space or home hardening for their own home. Okay, so I just want to make sure that that message gets out there, because it's lost sometimes that, oh, we have a fire department, they're going to come in and save us. We want to, believe me. We all want to be heroes. We all want to go and put Bruce over our shoulder and go out the house. But at the end of the day, we really need the community to do their part. And so that's one of the pleas we have for you, is to do your part and do what Jordan is asking with the defensible space and the home hardening.
Thank you, Chief. Great point. Yeah, this is, and obviously I'm just trying to relay the information so you guys understand like how the fire department operations are going to work in these events. But those are all amazing points. I'm gonna have to start doing more squats and deadlifts, Bruce. I'm gonna have to come get you. I'm 5'5" on a good day, so I don't know. All right, cool. We'll tag team it. So yeah, this is off Boomin Road. Look at that access. if something's happening down there, the guys aren't going to have a problem. The crews aren't going to have a problem getting down there. There's plenty of area on the sides of the road for them to work, and they're not going to feel threatened if the fire's coming. It's not going to trap them, basically. Other important things, we get complaints all the time about hydrants being blocked, and our guys are out there maintaining all the hydrants, and this is one of their checklist items, is to make sure that it's accessible around the hydrants so that they can operate it. And then depending on the event, medical emergency, wildfire, what have you, we can't get to certain addresses if we can't read the address numbers. So here's a good example. There's an old one right there. We want contrasting backgrounds so that it's easily visible, like this one. And then good size numbers. Minimum, I think, is 4 inches for residential. So things to think about when events like that happen. If we can't get there, if we don't know, especially out here, you get random side roads, and it's like, well, which addresses are down this road? And then I'm sure, I think Sarah's brought some things to my attention about certain addresses that Google won't, Google Maps like will put you in different zones or different areas, like for deliveries or things like that. So, what do you call it? Most of our firefighters know the area super well, so that's not a big problem. We're not using Google Maps either, but having address numbers that are visible so that we can get there is really important and helps us out. So milestones, let's talk about some things that we're doing to help go in the right direction. The state required Zone 0. The new maps are coming out. Here's some stuff that we've done locally to improve. There's a Val Sereno vegetation grant. We're doing vegetation management, and we'll talk about some of the gates. So we had a partnered grant with the Nature Preserve, and there was 2 of them that went through. I think this is I didn't put the years on there. It started in 2022. And we got approved to, the Nature Preserve got approved to do removal of vegetation in the Val Sereno area, which is right here. And then, I forget what this one's called. Yeah, La Bajada, thank you. And there's 4 seasons they're gonna do. It was a grant they got from the state. 4 seasons of cutting. They got approved to do 16 acres and remove non-native vegetation and eucalyptus and 150 palms. That's been going on for 2 years. There's 2 more years of that, which is great. But there's a lot of vegetation in there, so I don't know if 4 years is going to do it. I guarantee 4 years is not going to do it. So that's one project that we partnered with them on. We supported them and helped them. They helped us, and we helped them get that grant so that this kind of stuff can take place. So that's one thing that's happening. Roadside vegetation. This is something that I've been spearheading for the last 2 years, and this is the roadside vegetation along evacuation routes and in very high fire hazard severity zones. The first year was 2022. We got approval through council, and it went through public works. So I'm working in collaboration with Public Works and their vegetation contractors. You'll probably see they look like these. There's one of them right here. They have another truck with the wood chipper on the back. So the ultimate goal is to get to 20, because that's CAL FIRE's standard and the county standard from the roadsides. But it's going to take some time. We just started in 2022. The 0 to 5 feet, mow grasses and cut vegetation back, that was achieved. We hit 5 to 10, mostly 5 to 10, but that's really just the low growing stuff. There's 2 contractors, and it costs more money to cut trees than it does just to mow and push vegetation back from the road. So it's going to get pushed out, which is why this third one right here, my goal was to try to hit 15 feet in 3 years, but I don't know if that's going to be doable just because of the amount of vegetation, as well as, like I said, there's 2 contractors. There's a 6 foot and down contractor, and then there's above 6 feet for trees. So that's what we're doing right now. It's making good progress. I actually have to get an update from Public Works on this year to try to give them guidance on it. The biggest thing this year that we're trying to do is we're trying to eliminate the trees and branches from overhanging the road. Just like defensible space from your house, we don't want those things overhanging the road, because that's going to limit our access and put us in danger, as well as you in danger if you're trying to evacuate. So more stuff to come on this. We're going to try to get more, hopefully with the backing that we have, and we can get some more money towards that program. And then lastly is the emergency access gates. This is the double LL gate. This is the one that goes to Carlsbad, and then there's another one at the beginning of the HOA. So we've been working with the HOA for double LL, and we actually have a remote app system where we can go on our phones called Summit Control, and if something happens like an emergency, then we can open that gate, and we don't have to physically come out here. And because all the gates have to have Knox keys and then opticons for us to get through. So if the lights turn on, we turn our lights on, the gates will open automatically. But from here, we can be anywhere. I can be at home and go to the app, and I can open the gate. Yeah. So we have those two gates, at the beginning of the HOA for double LL, the lower one, and then this one that goes to Carlsbad. So if something happens, we have that ability. So that's going to drastically cut time down for response, right? Like the sheriff was saying, the technology that we're trying to get now is really helping us move things forward. I didn't have a chance to put it up on my maps for Valserino. It was too busy. It didn't look that good, so I didn't put it in there. But we have a vegetation layer now where we can use LiDAR to read how thick the vegetation is in certain areas and then see where the defensible space lines are. That helps us go out there and evaluate hazards and say, hey, this roadway has a lot of vegetation on it. Once they're doing the vegetation management, we need to concentrate on this area. So that's one of the aspects that Chief Gordon has, I think he did it like 6 months ago, but yeah, something's really good. And then that's all I got for defensible space and home hardening. After the presentation, we'll take questions, and then we have the resources and handouts. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and then I'm going to hand off to Chief Gordon.
Thank you. You almost had to catch me. Just a couple things on the technology is, Sarah had brought up what Rancho Santa Fe was doing with that layer. Basically, it's a flyover with a plane. They look at the vegetation and how it's overgrown, and I could see each one of your properties to see what your vegetation looks like. I was going to show that up on the screen and let you guys all just fight over who's got the best vegetation management, but we decided that probably wouldn't go well. But we do have that, right? So I could zoom in on Bruce's house and be like, look, you've got vegetation overhanging your property or your home. So we see all that, right? And we want to just support you guys and making sure that you're cleaning all that off of your property. So, and it helps us with planning. One of the things that the technology is bringing is, who's here heard of Genesis Protect? Hopefully everybody raises your hand. We have Genesis EVAC too. So before we came here today, I was messing around with it. I dropped a fire on Dove Hollow. I dropped one here. And I put in what the wind conditions were, what the temperature was, the relative humidity, what our fuel moistures were, and I saw the modeling on how it would work in 1 hour, 2 hours, all the way up to 9 hours. And why that's important is when we do have a fire, we can see what evacuation zones need to go first with orders or warnings, and then we can get ahead of that. We kind of understand how our terrain is going to burn and what evacuation zones need to go. So we're ahead of the game because of the technology that we're bringing in. All right, let me figure out how this works. This button. All right, cool. All right, so a lot of questions about water supply, right? Olivenhain is a little bit unique in that there are some longer spread, longer distance in between some hydrants. So we do have fire engines that have 800 feet of 4-inch and 800 feet of 2.5-inch, right? So we do have the ability to get a hydrant and then get to your home. Who knows that they're greater than 800 feet away from a hydrant? Okay, yeah, you are. Okay. When I was first on probation, I'll tell a little story. We were training in Rancho Santa Fe. We're coming home, got a fire here off of Coppercrest, and get up there. We end up sinking the truck because we had so much water going. But it was a very long hose lay. We had all of the hose off of one engine, and then the second engine had to lay its hose, and we connected. And so it was a lot of hose, and I remember being on probation having to pick up like 1,200 feet of hose all by myself. Okay, so it is a problem, right? Our hydrants are spread far, but we do have the ability with the amount of hose we have to reach your home. A lot of talk about water systems with the Palisades fire, right? Two things I want to say first. One is the amount of water that they could get out of a hydrant was not going to stop a natural disaster that the Palisades fire was. 90-mile-an-hour winds, the amount of fire that was coming towards them, and a wall of fire. I know there's firefighters in here that it sounds like a freight train coming at you, okay? There's no way that spraying water into 90-mile-an-hour wind with how hot it is was going to stop anything. But it could have helped with putting out some structures, right? A fire hydrant is built and to the standard to put out a structure fire. That's it. So if you look, 1,500 GPM within the first 8 minutes, and it lasts up to 2 hours. That is what they're built for. So if you think our hydrants are here to stop a large wildland fire, we're mistaken, okay? The residential interiors is a minimum of 1,000 GPM. We actually have more. We have 1,500 in all of our areas. We have good water pressure here. Our commercial industrial can get up to 3,500 GPM. And then we meet all those water supply standards. We meet the NFPA standard with our water system. Now, if everybody in Encinitas went home and turned on their water in their faucet, do you think you would have pressure? No, right? So I just want to, we don't rely on the water system when a huge wildland fire comes. Do we want water? Yes, 100%, right? Some people don't know that when we do have a red flag warning or high wildland event come here, we upstaff an additional engine into Olivenhain. We also have a water tender on standby that has additional water. We're actually looking to purchase a new water tender that has 4,000 gallons of water in it. So yes, we want water, right? But it's not to stop a major fire. It's to protect our firefighters, put out homes when we can. We do this thing called fire front following. So if a fire does come through here, a lot of times what happens is the brush or the wood pile or something on fire continues to go, and that's what catches the house on fire. So what we'll do is come back around after the fire comes and start putting out all these little fires so that the homes don't catch on fire. It's called fire front following. That's all. I only had one. Whoop. Perfect. I like it. Was this me too? Darn it. All right. Training and preparedness. Yeah, so I know Lieutenant Davis is going to talk about this as well, but we do a lot of training. We do the county wildland drill, which I know some have been to. We've got the Olivenhain wildland drill, who's seen us driving around with our lights on and helicopters coming in pretending to drop water out by Dove Hollow, I think it was last time. That's always fun. It's fun to get all the phone calls about why do we have helicopters everywhere. But we're all practicing out in where we might have to play someday. We have our RT-130 drills, which does a lot of area familiarization, make sure that we're pulling the hose, we're looking at our shelters, using all the equipment that we don't all get to use every day. And then we have the North Zone San Diego County, well, it's what is it called? Extended attack drill. And so I know he's going to talk about that too, because we do the same stuff the sheriffs do. We invite them to play. They invite us to play. We have a very good working relationship with our sheriff here. Actually, I think the coastal sheriff station and the fire department is probably the envy of most of the other sheriff areas, right? Because of the relationship we have with them. But this extended attack drill, it mimics a large wildland fire coming with evacuations in a multiple day event. And our battalion chiefs and operation chiefs have to go through this drill, and it is basically 3 days in a 30-minute drill, and they're in your face, putting pressure, making you make decisions, making sure you know what the evacuation zones are, how to use Genesis, how to communicate with each other, and it's an amazing drill that really shows them, hey, you better know your stuff, and our guys do. So we do a lot of extra training. Our Olivenhain wildland drill is April 28th, 29th, and 30th this year, so you'll see us out in the community again. I know we will have the Olivenhain Fire Safe Council, probably some council members out there with us being part of that drill. So just say hi, come talk to us. We want to talk to you. We want to talk about your home and what we're seeing. We're going to put those WUI cards on your home and say whether it's defensible or not defensible. We did that last time, and someone was like, "Whoa, what do you mean?" And we're like, "Well, let me show you about your yard," and they were shocked. So, yeah. So I hit the right way this time. Anyway, a lot of training goes on, a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that not everybody's aware of, but we train a lot. Today we had an all-hands meeting with all the captains, engineers, firefighters, our EM, our prevention staff, our admin staff, and one of the things that it's a complaint, but in a good way, is that we have so much training that we're doing every month. It's hard to fit in our business inspections. It's hard to fit in, taking care of some of our equipment, but training is what gets us to help save your life and your property, right? So it's the most important thing for us, and we are highly trained and ready to come and help serve Olivenhain.
All right, so let's start with this. Let's get all in the mindset that you're emergency managers. And so what I'm going to start with, and maybe you guys are thinking maybe she's just going to talk about how do you put together an emergency plan, what do I put in my kit? But what I want to start with is let's talk about whose responsibility is for emergency preparedness. It's the whole community. It's the residents, it's your neighbors, you see we've got homeowners association, faith-based organizations. Many of you could probably go down and do a checklist of some of these groups. And this is not a exclusive, right? It's not totally inclusive, right? There's a lot of other pieces on here. But you'll notice a key piece of this, that's the city staff and elected officials. We're fortunate we have two of our elected officials here tonight because they play a key role in what we do as a city and how we plan, prepare, and respond to emergencies. So I really want you to think about that as we're talking about this. You know, we've had Jordan talk about defensible space, home hardening. We talked to the chief talking about what we do operationally, but I want you to start thinking about that preparedness piece. So where I always like to start with is our hazards. What kind of hazards do we have here that we experience here in Encinitas? Now, I respect that we were invited by the Fire Safe Council, so you all are thinking, well, why aren't we just focusing on fires? Because those are not the only hazards that impact our community. So before I go to the next slide, let's think about it. What would we say the top 5 hazards that we have in Encinitas? Go ahead, just kind of call them out. Okay, tsunamis, okay, what else? Earthquakes, okay. Gas, okay, that's kind of always an interesting one that I think sometimes people forget about. So let me go back to this previous slide. One of the things that I do as emergency manager in partnership with the County of San Diego Office of Emergency Services is that every 5 years we update what we call our hazard mitigation plan. That plan is actually developed, it's kind of across the departments within the city. It's also in partnership with the County Office of Emergency Services, as well as other subject matter experts, bringing in a lot of information to help us identify what those hazards look like. So let's talk about that. So if you look at here, and this is actually from our hazard mitigation plan, that plan that you saw on the screen, you can go to the County of San Diego Office of Emergency Services to see that plan. So some of those items were called out. Wildland fire, right? Shouldn't be a shock to us. Earthquakes, severe winter weather. So even though right now we are in a drought type condition, think about this a year ago. Around this time, we had just come out of the January 22nd storm. We saw severe flooding. You know, this time actually, you know, we were working on recovery from a severe winter storm, extreme heat and drought, okay? So why do I talk about this in relationship to wildland fire is because some of these things tie into that. Drought, extreme heat, things that you're going to want to consider and to think about when you are preparing for a wildland fire. Also, we can have an earthquake, right? It's hard to imagine. As an emergency manager, you never want to talk about the hazards or emergencies that can happen, because then they'll happen. But it's something for you to think about. We could have an earthquake here, and the same things I'm going to go over in some of these other slides are going to be the same things you're going to think about in relationship to a wildland fire. So there's many, and some of these tools Chief touched on, but I really wanted to talk about hazard situational awareness, because it's something that we in the fire department, we do on a daily basis. We are constantly looking and scanning and understanding what threats are potentially going to happen. We're looking at, when we're things from national weather. So if you remember back in December and in January, we had red flag warnings. Year ago, we were looking at severe winter weather. We were looking at flooding. Here, we were then having a conversation on red flag warnings. We get daily updates, several of us in the fire department, including our marine safety team, on weather conditions. So we're constantly scanning and looking at weather conditions. How many of you are familiar with the Alert California cameras? So I'm going to encourage you, because remember, you're emergency managers. I want you to think about situational awareness. I want you to get really comfortable with knowing some of these tools. Some of these are not just specific to the fire department or to the sheriff or law enforcement. These are tools that you can tap into. So the cameras, what's nice about those, there are several, I'm going to say dozens of cameras just throughout San Diego County, but also throughout western United States, that are actually fixed cameras. Some of them are what they call point tilt zoom cameras, so those can actually rotate depending on where the fire or hazard is. Also, we'll talk about this. How many of you have the SDG&E alert app? It's a great app. What I like about this app is you can get, and again, something I'm going to encourage you to download, but you can find out when there is a power shutoff in your neighborhood. You can get status updates. You can also go to their website, but it's a great app. We work very closely with the County of San Diego Office of Emergency Services. We also have good working relationships also with several of the county departments like environmental health. As an emergency manager, and I will say emergency managers were for a lot of fire departments, it was an ancillary duty. It was a battalion chief, sometimes a deputy chief that would take on that role. I'm very appreciative here in the city of Encinitas, and appreciate the support from the chief as well as our elected officials to actually have a dedicated emergency manager for the city. So I work very closely on what we call the North Zone, North County, as well as on the regional level. And work very closely with emergency managers. That becomes very important. So how many of you remember when we had that odd odor that happened last September? We, as several emergency managers here in the North Zone, we were working together collaboratively to identify and just tap in and see what was happening with the other cities, and just making sure that we had collaborative information going around. Working very closely with CAL FIRE. They're a great resource for us. And I'm just mentioning some of these because I want you to know that we don't wait until the disaster is happening to do this collaboration or to tap into that situational awareness. So let me give you an example. This is something that several of us in the fire department get on a daily basis. This comes out from SDG&E, and it talks about the fire potential index. So this was back in November, and you can see we're in NC, which is north coastal area. You can see we can, at least a week out, we'll know if we're going to be moving into a high fire elevated danger area. This becomes a really important tool for us to be able to tap into. I'll show you a little bit later in my presentation how you can have access to this same information. So mitigation is a really important concept that we use in emergency preparedness all the time. This is the only part of my presentation I'm going to read, but because I think it's important. Mitigation is the reduction of loss of life and property by lessening the impact of disasters, and includes any activity that prevents an emergency or reduces effects of hazard. Now remember, you're all emergency managers. We do our part as public safety to mitigate, but it's also really important that all of you are doing your part as community emergency managers to mitigate any risk from that defensible space, the home hardening, and from the preparedness. And one of the things, and I know there's a lot of conversation around insurance, we're not the insurance experts, but I do always put this on here on that mitigation, is that you're having those conversations with your insurance company. I believe Sarah's left some information on insurance, but making sure that you're having those conversations with your insurance agent or broker and making sure that you have the coverage that's needed. All right, so let's talk about a little bit about preparing for a disaster. Now maybe this might explain why do I start with the hazards, because you have to know what your hazards are. How many of you, when you go on you're gonna take a vacation, you do some planning, right? You might think, when am I gonna leave? What am I gonna pack? Where am I going? What is the weather like? Am I gonna fly there? Am I gonna drive there? It's very similar in emergency management. You have to know your hazards. You have to have some idea of what those potential impacts are so you can be able to plan effectively for them. Ensure that you've signed up for emergency notification alerts, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Let me go kind of in the second to last one. You're going to hear this theme going throughout this presentation, and that's on the evacuation routes. We know as public safety partners with this community how important that conversation is, and it's really important for you as community emergency managers to really know, not just for your home, but also how do I get out if I'm at work, I'm at school, I have children or others that are at school. How do I plan for that? Okay, I'm going to put you guys on the spot. How many of you already have a plan? Okay. I promise, no public shaming. But remember, we don't know where we're going until we know where we're starting. So now we know where you're starting. You're starting from a place that you know that if you are going to there's a disaster that happens. Using the chief's modeling. If that fire happened over the hill here, and in 2 hours, we knew a fire was going to be here, what would you do? How would you plan? How would you evacuate? What things are you going to take with you? As an emergency manager, I always say, disasters don't happen at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They happen at 2 o'clock in the morning. So, for all the people that didn't raise your hands, tomorrow morning, start developing your plan, and we'll talk about the importance of that. So you're going to want to designate a relative or a friend outside of the area. Why is that important? Why do you think you would want somebody to know outside of this area if there was a disaster or emergency that might be impacting where you live? Correct. Yeah, and it's good. It's good for people outside of the area. So if something happens, right? I'm sorry, I apologize. Can you pass my water? Thank you, sir. And can you do me a favor?
What was your answer?
And I used to work for AT&T Telecom. So the telecommunications are down, or probably more importantly, you have taken all those resources so you can do your business. Just like 9/11, hard getting people, so you pass the message to somebody else.
Perfect.
Thank you, Chief. You also want a way to be able to, so if for some reason, again, if infrastructure, the telecommunications, things like that are down, but you also want, a way for people just to know, again, how are you doing? Are you safe, right? You want that check-in point, right? So there's also, you've probably seen this through, Facebook. There's other ways where you can do kind of a safe check-in, but this is just a good way. Involving your family and friends in the planning is really important. How many of you know your neighbors? And I know when I asked, and that's why I kind of knew in this community, you know your neighbors, but that's a really important part of when you're doing your emergency planning. So that people know, here's what my plan is, here's what I'm going to do, here's what we've talked about. Review and update your plan. How many of you have put together a will or a trust and it sits on a shelf somewhere and you haven't seen it in a while? That's not what your emergency plan is, right? Your emergency plan is something that you want to be reviewing and updating and making sure that it's current. And then evacuation planning happens before an emergency or disaster happens. You don't want to wait till 2 o'clock in the morning when you have to evacuate to think about how you're gonna leave your neighborhood. And then practicing that plan. So we'll go in a little bit more detail about it, right? So some key elements, some of these things I've talked about. Where will you meet family or friends? So if you're going to be leaving your home, where are you going to go to? And we'll talk about emergency notifications. If we had to evacuate, and I'm going to talk more on the application side of evacuation, and Lieutenant Davis will talk more about on the operational side of it. But just knowing where you're going to evacuate to. So if you're going to evacuate up and out of the area. Who's your out of area check-in? We talked about this about a moment ago. What route, I'm going to kind of jump through, but what route and several alternatives will you use to evacuate your neighborhood? Now, I know I have Sarah up here going like this. I understand that. But these are some of the things that even in this community, just to think about that a little bit. Think about it in advance. Don't wait. There are some limitations, and it's not to bring up the limitations of the evacuation, but it is making you just to think about that. And also, do you have transportation? Do you know of anybody that lives in this community that may not have transportation? So that's kind of important. That's why I asked that question about knowing your neighbors. Because if you might have a vehicle, but your neighbor doesn't, can you help them to get up and out of the area? Because remember, whole community. We respond, we plan as a whole community. And did you practice your plan? Remember, don't make your plan and just put it up on a shelf. Start developing and thinking about your Go Kit. A Go Kit is not just something that you have for your home. You have something in your vehicle. So if you went out to my car right now, you'd see that, and this is true for both of my husband's and my vehicles. We have a backpack. It's our Go Kit for our vehicle, and we have a toolkit in both of our vehicles. We have a Go Kit at home, so we have a lot of these supplies. We have food supplies, but do I tuck that in the back of the closet in my house, or do I have it easily accessible? Easily accessible, because 2 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to have to think, where do I have my Go Kit? Where are these supplies? You want to know exactly where those supplies are at, and you want to make sure that you're going through and you're updating those supplies. You're thinking about the food. You're thinking about your water supplies. Okay, so it's really important that you're really thinking about some of those things that you're going to have. This is not an exhaustive list. There's other resources you will see on flyer that the handout I have. But for everybody, we also have other important stuff that we would put into our Go Kit. For some people, you might have, again, and when we look at this, I'm talking about you as emergency managers, but I'm also saying to you, this is for you as an individual, it's for your family, it's for your friends, it's for your community here in Olivenhain, but also the greater community. You may have people that live in your home or your neighborhood that have access and functional needs. Maybe they use a wheelchair. Maybe they have mobility challenges. So really thinking about what that other important stuff is that would be important. How many of you, if I went and I took all of your cell phones away, would you start to shake a little bit, be a little nervous? So imagine in a disaster, and your cell phone dies, and you don't have access to critical information, and we'll talk about that in a moment. It's really important that in your Go Kit, you have a way that you're able to charge your cell phone, right? So really thinking about this. And those kind of resources, and I say this, oftentimes when people look at this list, I can tell you, you might have a lot of these things already in your house. So just going through this list and thinking about, and on the handout that I brought, it has a lot of that information. All right, how many of us remember beginning of the pandemic, everybody rushing to Costco to get toilet paper? So the time to plan for a disaster emergency is not when it starts. You want to make sure, so I hope that if I come back here in a year, and if many of these same people are here and I ask that question, how many of you have a plan? Everybody's going to raise their hand. Everybody's going to say, yes, we have our supply kit. We've got our Go Kit, Marie. Because you don't want to wait until that disaster happens. You want to make sure that you have your supplies together and you're ready to go when that disaster emergency happens. So when we talk about evacuation, I know we're talking about how do I evacuate my neighborhood, but really where evacuation starts is in your home, is thinking about how am I going to get out of my home when there's an emergency or disaster. So really, this is something that you should have in your plan. You want to know, if you're in your bedroom, do you have trip hazards? Do you have things that might impede your ability to be able to get up and out of your bedroom or out of your home? So this doesn't apply just to if there is that fire that's coming over the hill. Could be a fire or an emergency that's happening at your house. So you'll notice that I have that meeting space location. It could be physically to just outside of your house, or it could be outside of your neighborhood. So really thinking about the evacuation. And then sheltering. So sheltering can happen. You might be, and I know that Lieutenant Davis will talk about kind of evacuations, but it could be, you could be asked to shelter in place, which means being at home, staying at home for an extended period of time. So do you have amount of food that you need? Do you have the water? If you take medication, do you have medication to be able to sustain you for a period of time? And you may say, well, wait a second, why would we have to, have an extended stay for several days or up to 2 weeks? Let's say we have an earthquake and we have power outages. We have, water infrastructure that's been damaged. These are the kind of things, because remember, you as emergency managers, you think about all hazards, not just the ones where the fire department's going to come in and maybe that fire's put out within a couple days. And then mass care community shelter, and I'm going to touch a little bit on this. We as a city have the ability to be able to stand up a mass care shelter at our community and senior center. But I'm going to stress this now, and I'm going to talk about this in a moment when we talk about emergency notifications. It's really important not to rely on the fact that that's where we're going to stand up a shelter. It's really important to make sure that you are, and we'll talk about this in a moment, but you're signed up to receive those emergency notifications, that you're tapped into, and I know Chief talked about this application, and I'll talk about it in a moment, but you've downloaded the important apps like Genesis Protect, so you know if you're being asked to evacuate and you're asked to leave your home, where you're going to evacuate to. So it's really important that you're tapping into that information. So we have the temporary evacuation point. We do not, I know I don't mean to take your thunder, Lieutenant Davis, but we never ask people to just evacuate without telling you and giving you a place to go, right? So one of the places, typically because we want to get people up and out of that danger area as quickly as possible, we're going to send you to a temporary evacuation point. And again, that's determined on where the disaster emergency is. We don't want to send you, obviously, evacuating into the area of where that disaster emergency is. And then, as I said, that mass care shelter. So it's city hosted, but we work in partnership with the American Red Cross, but also the Humane Society. Because, to what Justin said is we find that if people don't have a place where they can evacuate with their animals, they're probably not going to leave. So it's something that, this was something that actually became a state law a few years ago. And so now we actually are required, but we were doing this long before we were required to do it as a city. So we do host our pet family members. So let me talk about a really critical tool, and that's Alert San Diego. How many of you have been to this website before? If you haven't, and again, I'm going to encourage everybody, utilize this as a resource. Alert San Diego, not only the County of San Diego Office of Emergency Services has done an amazing job of providing and building out a website that has really great tools to help with on the preparedness side, on that emergency side, but also if we did have a disaster emergency on that recovery side. But this is a really important tool. How many of you are already signed up to receive emergency notifications and alerts? Again, this is your homework, because as emergency managers, you're going to have this tool. Why is that important? Because if there's a disaster emergency and we're going to be evacuating as an example, this is one of the ways that we're going to be communicating out. So, and I know that Lieutenant Davis will talk more about this, but those notifications are actually in partnership with, so if there's an incident, when that incident happens, that conversation is happening between the fire department and the Sheriff's Department is going to initiate that notification. But an important piece here is that how many of you still have a landline? Okay. So when this system rolled out, I think close to 20 years ago, anybody that had a landline was already added to the system. But if you don't have a landline, you have to do what we call opt-in. So you have to register your phone, your email, and if you have a voice over IP system, you can register that as well. So it's kind of an important piece. You can also, in that registration process, if you have another language that you would like to receive those notifications in, but it also has the ability for ASL as well. So it's a really robust system. Another piece to this is on how notifications will go out is also through what we call wireless emergency alerts, and that is driven off of cell towers. So you don't need to opt in for those notifications. It's based on cell tower locations, and I'm just going to double check this with Lieutenant Davis, but my understanding is now it's all notifications go out in both fashions, correct? Multi-layered, always, okay. Because there was a time where it was just, and it was dependent on kind of, I think, based on the incident, but now it's just the best practice is it is in both. So, but that's kind of, and what's nice, what I say about the WIAs, as we call them, is it's also really nice when you have, because we obviously are a tourist community. We get a lot of people that visit our community, so that's another nice way for people that are visiting the community. If they're in that cell tower area, they're going to receive those notifications. Okay, I know Chief talked about this, and I'm going to tell you this is probably one of my favorite tools that we have in public safety. It's something that rolled out here. So there was Genesis Alert, that's kind of, the county updated its notification system. We had an older, antiquated system. It was fairly limited in its ability to be able to send out those emergency notifications. The county worked to update the alert side of the house. And then something that Chief talked about, Genesis Protect is the forward-facing part of Genesis EVAC. So that's what law enforcement, the fire department will use on that back end. This, I want to make sure everybody downloads this application. This is such a powerful tool that you, as emergency managers, community emergency managers, you can see what's happening in real time. A lot of times we had to rely on social media, we had to rely on local media, or you had to go to Kogo. If you remember, you'll see that as a resource. But this is such a powerful tool because you can see there's a web version of this, there's also an application version of this. You can see in real time when your zone changes. And I'll explain a little bit more about what that looks like. What happened was, and Lieutenant Davis was actually part of this team, when they were rolling this out, the way that it used to be prior to the rollout of this was based on public grid squares. Then they decided, you know what, some of those had actually cut off neighborhoods, or it split like Saxony Canyon, I think, down the middle. So there was just some challenges with that. So Chief, many of you may know Deputy Chief Sanchez, and I bring this up because it really does tie into Olivenhain, because many of you know the Olivenhain evacuation plan that was updated a couple years ago, and it broke the community up into the 5 different zones. Well, now, what we look at is there's also, and I don't want to confuse this, but I'm bringing this up now, there's also, we use the same terminology as far as zones for Genesis Protect. So you have that ability to be able to register up to 5 zones based on address. So you can get notifications. So when those alerts go out and you're in that zone, you'll get pinged that there's been a change in the status for that zone. So let's talk a little bit about what this looks like. So that ability, this shows you on the application side where you can go ahead, you can update that, add different addresses in there. And here's what that looks like. This is on the website. Lieutenant Davis will go in more detail and talk about how that's used on the operational side from an incident command standpoint, but you can see when that evacuation status has changed. This was for the Lilac fire earlier this year, and you can see that is that evacuation order, which means leave immediately. Okay, so let's talk, I just mentioned this a moment ago. So how many of you are familiar with the 5 zones for Olivenhain? this is kind of a really important piece because it's something I know Sarah and I have chatted about this. It's important when the notifications go out, we're not going to communicate in the terminology of the Olivenhain evacuation plan. It's going to be in the Genesis protect zones. So it's really important that you go in and you get to know your zone. You can, off the website, go in, you can do a search on Genesis Protect. You can put in your address to find out what zone you are. But if you already know what zone you are for on the Olivenhain side, it gives you an idea of what zone that you could be in. And I will be providing this information to Sarah so she can push it out to everybody. Sure. Sure.
So one of the things about the difference is when you guys look at the operational plan or the Olivenhain evacuation plan, that is an operational plan. It's not necessarily for the community, right? We give you that access to see what it is, but one of the things that, you know, Sarah kind of puts her hands up of like, I don't know what my evacuation route is. If you can get to Rancho Santa Fe, that's your evacuation route for the most part, right? We only have so many ways to go. But once you get to certain spots, I cannot tell you which way is safe or not until the fire is actually there. It's dynamic, right? A lot of us, and firefighters are the same way, we want absolutes. Tell me how to get from A to B to C to D. But the fire is not like that. I don't know where it's going to start, when it's going to start, how fast it's going to move. And so if I give you an evacuation route now, or I say, hey, here's your zones, here's the evacuation route, and you go that way and it pushes you into the fire, then we set you up for failure, right? One of the things that we see as first responders is the moth to the light, right? Or running around in circles. When we go on scene in an emergency, people don't think correctly, right? They kind of freak out. And so if I'm telling you somewhere to go, and you're like, no, the fire chief said I need to go from A to B to C, but there's a huge fire right in front of me, there's a lot of people that are still going to go from A to B to C because the fire chief said go that way. So that is one of the huge reasons I cannot give you right now from your house what your evacuation route is, because I could be sending you into a dangerous position. Olivenhain gets its own evacuation plan because there's really only one way out from Lone Jack to Rancho Santa Fe. Then we can start using our sheriffs and directing you. There's double LL, which I've always just said double L, but I'm going to use what Jordan said, right? And so there's certain ways to go here that we can let you know how to get there because of the uniqueness of Olivenhain. Once we go out into the rest of the city, there's so many other ways to get these arteries that I cannot just give evacuation routes right away because it could put you in a dangerous position. So that's why when you guys see all of our evacuation stuff, it's a little bit vague once it gets to the left and right turns out here because we don't know what the safe way is going to be, what the most expedient or efficient way is going to be. So some patience. I'm going to let Lieutenant Davis talk more about the evacuations, but I just want to think about that as he's speaking so that there's a little bit more of patience or understanding of where we're coming from when we're not giving you that A to B to C right now.
Thank you, Chief. And what's also really important to what the Chief said is that because you're thinking about situational awareness, if you're thinking about that there's a fire in Harmony Grove, and you know, red flag, you know some of the conditions, because you're looking at the situational awareness, you don't have to wait to get that emergency notification to evacuate. You don't have to wait. You don't need to get that. You can make that determination to evacuate before you're asked to evacuate. Now, granted, 2 o'clock in the morning, that might be a little bit of a different conversation, but that's not to say, and we'll talk about this, is these are some of the tools that you have available to you that you can look at before a fire actually happens, right? So one of the tools that the county provides, which is the SD emergency application, it provides information for you. How many of you have Pulse Point? Pulse Point is kind of, and the nice thing, I have Encinitas Fire Department. But you can also bring up other fire departments. You can add other fire departments in there. If you're like, oh, there's a fire over in Escondido, you know what? Let me see what's happening with Escondido Fire Department. What are they doing responding to some of those fires, some of the outlining areas? Remember I mentioned the SD weather? Remember I showed you earlier that fire potential index? This is the exact same information that I receive. So you too can have that information. You can start tracking and looking and planning in advance. Hey, I can see that it's a red flag warning. Maybe it's not for my area. I can see that they're doing power shutoffs, outside of the outlining area. It gives you that information to think in advance. And many of you, if you didn't know anything about watch duty, if you were tracking anything that was happening with the fires up in LA, heard a lot about watch duty. So I will tell you that somebody who works in public safety, when that first came out, you kind of cringed a little bit because some of that information wasn't necessarily vetted. We were tracking it on our side because of situational awareness. I would say they became a little bit of a star of the show, with the fires. I would still, the way that I look at watch duty is there's good information there, but I don't rely on one tool. I have several tools in my toolbox that I look at, but I would say there's some good information in there. They have started partnering a little bit with Genesis and updating that. So if you look at watch duty, if you ever track any of those fires, I'm a geek, it's what I do for a living. So I look at these things, not just what's happening here in San Diego County. You'll see that Genesis Protect is tied into that, and they'll talk about what zones are being evacuated. So one of the key things, and I'm excited to bring up Justin, and I had to leave this picture in here, because when we talk about your plan, where you're going to evacuate, what you're going to do, it's really important, and especially in this community, and I'm going to look over to Jennifer because I know Jennifer's a horse person, is that we think about what you're going to do for your pets. And I'm so excited that Justin's here to talk about that.
Thanks, Marie. Thanks, everyone, for having me here today. This is me. I think this was at the Valley Fire that was down in Alpine back in like 2020. Just a little quick thing about me. I've been with the San Diego Humane Society probably for a little over 10 years total as a humane officer. I was actually based up in Oceanside, and my area was around here, so I'm pretty familiar with some of the animal-related issues here and some of the properties that have animals here. I transitioned to the emergency manager about a year ago, but I've responded to a lot of pretty large incidents, including the Paradise Fire. I deployed up there for about a week. Most recently, I was up in Pasadena for the Eaton Fire for a week, came home, and the next day we had to go help out our friends at the county at the Lilac Fire. So we have a team of, primarily it's volunteers who are trained in mostly fire, animal search and rescue. It's a pretty unique team. All of our team members who go behind fire lines are actually trained to the wildland firefighter level 1. We do regular training all the time, and a lot of the folks, it's their hobby and they like to keep it up in sort of a social event. So we have a really great specially trained team that's there to help out, but there's not a lot of us, and we service a pretty large area. The San Diego Humane Society is contracted to do animal control for 13 cities in the county. It's basically every city with the exception of Chula Vista. So it's really, if there is an emergency coming, we really do rely on the community to prepare in advance. How many pet owners do we have here? All right, how many large animal livestock owners do we have here? All right, we got a few here, horses. How many of you horse owners, how many of them easily load into trailers and love getting in and out of the trailer? Probably none of them. How many of them haven't been in a trailer since they got dropped off at your house? Yeah, there's a lot of them. So, we want to sort of reinforce what the chief and what Marie said. It's really up to you to prepare your pet, especially if you have livestock, and that livestock and those horses are not accustomed to getting in trailers. You really, really need to practice getting them in and out, because it's one thing for you as their owner to load them up in a trailer. It's another if you have a bunch of people dressed like big bananas and there's fire and smoke everywhere and they don't know them and they're trying to quickly shove them in a trailer to evacuate them. So Make sure to include your pets and livestock in your preparedness plan. Out on the table, I have 2 checklists. If you're a checklist type person, one for companion animals and one for livestock, just things to consider. Sometimes when people are planning their preparedness kits for their pets, they don't think about things like medications. If people have cats, they don't consider, oh, I might need some cat litter because cats won't go to the bathroom outside of a litter box with litter in it. So if you're in a hotel or you're in a shelter and you don't have that, your cat is going to be stressed out and it can cause medical issues. You should be prepared to care for your pets for at least 24 hours because it takes us a long time to get something spun up. If there's a fire and they're evacuating everything here, we're not going to immediately have an animal shelter set up. It might be 6 hours, it might be 8 hours, it could be 12 hours, it might be the next day. Particularly with livestock, we have all of our emergency equipment. Horse trailers are either out in Escondido or they're down at our San Diego campus, so they're not anywhere around here. So if we get called out or we come to help evacuate animals, it'll take time to go get our equipment, bring it here, and identify a location to take them. Animal rescue and response resources are just very limited in the county. We help out our county animal control partners in the unincorporated areas, and that we hope if something happens here, we can rely on them. So, we really just recommend, again, preparedness. Monitor your local weather conditions for fire weather. Usually these fires aren't a surprise. We know it's going to happen. There's weather patterns, wind, a lot of forecasting that goes on. So if you get a red flag warning and you have horses or livestock, get ready to evacuate your animals. And check our social media sites and also check our partners, Sheriff's Department, news channels. They'll have information about where these animal sheltering sites are. I think the presumption is if there is a big fire and you have livestock, for instance, that you're just going to take it straight to the Del Mar Fairgrounds. That's not the case because those grounds are operated by the state of California. And the way resource ordering works when there's disasters in the state, we can't just call up the fairgrounds and say, hey, open up. We are going to have some people with horses come shelter there for a week or 2 weeks or a month. Those requests have to go, from the city up to the county level. And then once it's determined that we've exceeded the resources that we have in the county, then that request will have to go up to the state level. Then they'll have to authorize opening the fairgrounds, and then possibly we can, open a shelter site there. So that's just something to consider. If there is a emergency, don't just load up your horses and drive them down to the Del Mar Fair and assume that they're going to shelter them. All right.
Thanks, sir. Yeah, so Lieutenant Mike Davis here with our Sheriff's North Coastal Station, touching base back on evacuations. We generally have evacuation points for people and then another evacuation point for people with large animals. And while he described there may be a delay with the Del Mar Fairgrounds, we have many other places at our disposal for a large animal evacuation point in the interim. A number of county parks, fairgrounds facilities, etc. that while if we had a wildfire in Harmony Grove that's a Santa Ana condition and blowing towards the coast, Del Mar might not be operable, although it's a big horse facility, air quality, other things, although it might not burn structurally. There's lots of other places in the county that we can get our people, our large animals, to other jurisdictions where they're safe, where we're going to be able to have them to where we're not going to have to evacuate them a second time. So we'll touch into some of that. So we do have contingency plans. There's a lot of locations that are at our disposal. Chief Gordon talked earlier about some of the training and preparedness that we do. We are very blessed here in San Diego County to have such a unique and excellent working relationship with all of our fire entities. And we train regionally year round, and that's not just the sheriffs here at Encinitas. I spent 2.5 years in the sheriff's office emergency planning, and basically that's planning and training my agency for disasters, civil unrest, large-scale things. I was blessed enough, I've spent about 5 years on 2 different evacuation subcommittees. Spent 2.5 years on our San Diego County multi-agency one, and I was fortunate enough to help bring Genesis Protect to our county. All of these technology products that have been discussed earlier tonight we didn't have those abilities in the past. That communication flow that we now have here in the county, information, we always are looking and seeking for information. Now there's several different ways to get that information to allow us individually to make those decisions, so we're much more informed from the law enforcement, public safety side, as well as the individual member of the community who's now, as you've learned from Marie, emergency manager of your household, your community, to make those decisions, to decide what you need to do. We have multiple training layers. We have a learning management system that allows all of our deputies. We have training bulletins that come out for fire preparedness and other things. Wildfire video series that we've done over a number of times throughout my career, as well as the chief talked about, the multi-agency wildfire exercise. That's a 3-day exercise. It gets hosted around the county, a different location every year. Chula Vista was last year out in Eastlake, the year before that up in Verona on the anniversaries of the fire. So I also was fortunate enough to be part of the training cadre for that. And that is really, really important, because we really do our best to simulate those stressful wildfire conditions for our public safety, law and fire, emergency managers through stress inoculation, because that's what it's going to be when it comes down to it. So we try to train and emulate as best we can real life scenarios, putting our people through those experiences. Going back to that exercise and talking about law and fire and the unique relationship that we have here, we also host our partner neighboring counties. Orange County comes down, Riverside comes down, Imperial comes down. Firefighters from Mexico over the last couple years have started coming up and watching what we do and taking it back down to Mexico from a best practices standpoint, because it's very common for us to have border fires. And that communication is very important for us down on our southern border. So regionally, what we're doing here, other places are looking at what our law and fire and public safety is doing from a best practices standpoint, and they're taking it to other places. So I want to assure you that our public safety here in the county, and especially like the chief alluded to here in Encinitas, we really, really work well together and truly have your safety at heart. We do those wildfire attack drills around the county where we'll put the law enforcement and firefighter at the back of a tailgate and do that extended attack, just like the first 2 that were to show up on scene, and push it from there and run them through scenarios. We host those all over different fire districts. And we put all of our sergeants and lieutenants through annual, and we do that every single year. Our sergeants at the supervisory level and lieutenants, potentially incident commanders, that's a really important position for us, and we really focus on that training. In 2023, when I was in emergency planning, we brought Lieutenant Collins down from Butte County, who was the incident commander, if many of you remember the Camp Fire, which is one of the deadliest fires in California history. We brought him down. He was the incident commander for a week. We put our sergeants and lieutenants, and we got to hear him speak and take away some of those after action items. So while, we had 03, we had 07 here in the county, Lilac, and we've had a number of our own fires here in the county, we're always looking at the fires outside of our counties that we can learn from and have the takeaways from, if there's anything for us to be learned from those, to put the best interests of our communities here in San Diego County. As Lieutenant Stillions referred to, we like to dress up like bananas like fire, so we give our our deputies fire turnouts as well for safety purposes. It gets hot. Firewares and for a reason. And then the Sheriff's Operations Center. That's at our communications building. We staff that with lieutenants, captains, support personnel that should, sometimes as we've seen here in our county, we have multiple fires break out at one time. So we're able to support those incident commanders in various locations to ensure that we have continuity of operations running throughout the county so that we're still able to maintain those calls for service and assist where we can, get those resources in and here for our county. So Law and Fireworks, we use the incident command system. And when we have a fire or any other natural disaster, the beauty of the incident command system is it allows us to adapt that to the needs at hand. But we'll come into what's called unified command. And Law and Fire will come together, and the other necessary entities for that incident, fire's going to do what you would think fire's going to do. They're going to assist fighting the fire. Well, the law enforcement role under unified command in a wildfire is to conduct evacuations under the evacuation branch. And that's kind of what I'm going to go through here over the next few slides, the evacuations. We already covered alert and warnings. I'll discuss some road closures and stuff like that here in a second. Resource-wise, Sheriff's Office, if we were to have a wildfire here in Olivenhain or any of our other jurisdictions, whether I'm Ramona, Fallbrook, no matter where I'm at, I have the ability to draw from 50% of the Sheriff's Office on-duty personnel when I need them. If a wildfire breaks out right here, that's going to be one of the first things that I do, is I'm going to get the other deputies, the 50% from all the other sheriff's facilities, roll into me so I can have that staffing. They're going to come code 3, so that's an instant duplication of manpower resources that I could dial up, as well as assisting agencies, Carlsbad, San Diego, Oceanside, Escondido. I can draw those resources in here just like fire's going to do with those engine and apparatuses. They're going to pull them in. That's aside from mutual aid, large scale. Those are instant. Carlsbad's not going to need a mutual aid declaration. They're going to come. We're going to go to Carlsbad, going to send someone over to Escondido. East Lake's on fire. We're going to send deputies down to Chula Vista. It's just the way we work here in the county. Regional mutual aid, the Sheriff's Office is the mutual aid coordinator here for the county. And the beauty of that is we have ties through Cal OES, and we can go out of the county for whatever resources we need as well. Internally, we coordinate it within the county through the various agencies, but the Sheriff's Office is the regional mutual aid coordinator here for the county. So I mentioned earlier best practices and other things, but what we do here in Encinitas, here in Olivenhain, is the same thing that if you take a deputy or an officer or a firefighter from any other jurisdiction, the same procedure applies to how they're going to fight a fire and conduct evacuations. That's the beauty of it. When you have a wildfire, you're going to see apparatuses from all sorts of agencies. You're going to have, if you remember 07, San Diego, you're going to have all of those law enforcement entities coming in. So we have to know what each other's doing. That's why we stress the importance of training regionally. We have standardized checklists that when we come in under unified command, that we know that we're going to do. We assume these roles because they're known, because we've thought about them, we've talked about them, we've discussed them, we've put them on checklists because we use checklists for a reason. Disasters and other things are inherently stressful, even if you train to them. So we know what each other's role is going to be, no matter where we're at in the county. Evacuation orders, a little bit of terminology here. You've probably heard it around wildfires. We consider an evacuation order area anything that's going to be impacted within 0 to 2 hours. Now, how big or how small that's going to be is going to depend on the fire. The wind, is it a wind-driven fire, or is it a brush fire where, fortunately, it's a no-wind day, and you're just going to have, a 1 to 2 acre grass fire or whatever the case is. That 1 to 2 acre grass fire on a 25-mile-an-hour day, as you can all imagine, is going to be very different. The chief talked about Genesis EVAC, some of that fire modeling technology that we now have at as a resource for us on the public safety side. We can drop that pin. We can, at the exact location that our fire is. The chief can dial up the wind speeds, the fire conditions, and now we can better assess where that fire is going to be in 1, 2, 4, 8, 12, and 24 hours. We know where it's going to be. That will allow us to be a little more effective and precise with our evacuation orders. Anything beyond 2 hours, we consider an evacuation warning. So 2 hours plus, potential threat to life or property is what we consider a warning. Obviously, an order, immediate threat to life. So again, we take that information, we order up the evacuation orders. We try to be judicious with that, but try not to over-evacuate, but we'd rather err on the side of caution. So again, be prepared, like Marie was talking about, and if you have the ability, if we're in a community where we are, where there's only so many ways out, leave early. Be prepared for your animals, personal disaster plan for your family, those things, be prepared. Shelter in place, we'll use that occasionally. Places like schools, hospitals, maybe a nursing facility. So in conjunction with the fire department, if we believe that's going to be applicable, if that's something that we're going to reinforce with fire apparatuses and make sure that we're able to defend that. Occasionally there will be airborne gas leaks, things like that, where it's just safer for people to be inside, so you may see a shelter in place or something like that. Jeff, if you can, here in a second, we'll have you dial up as I'm talking about the high-low. If you've ever been to Europe and you've heard that European-style well, in 2020, the California legislature passed Senate Bill 909, and what that did, it allowed us to place that European-style well on law enforcement vehicles as an evacuation order notification. We use many methods for evacuation orders, Alert San Diego, WIA, door-to-door. This is one more tool that we have to notify individuals that they're in an evacuation order area when you hear this European-style well, and we'll go into it here in a second. As Jeff transitions here, okay.
Patrol cars in San Diego County are now equipped with the high-low. This unique sound is different from sirens you hear when deputies and officers respond to emergency calls. High-low quickly alerts entire neighborhoods that they are in immediate danger. This warning system will be used during wildfires, flash floods, earthquakes, and other natural disasters, or critical incidents requiring the evacuation of a particular area. When you hear this sound, you must evacuate immediately. To receive evacuation notifications during an emergency, register your cell phone with Alert San Diego and Accessible Alert San Diego at alertsd.org. Follow your local law enforcement and fire agency on social media, or stay up to date by watching the news. Remember, when you hear the high-low, it is time to go.
So keeping in mind that evacuation orders are multi-purpose, tonight we're mostly talking about wildfire and disaster preparedness. If you hear that high-low sound, you're in an area that is under an evacuation order. That's a multi-pronged way that we can roll out, notify people. We'll still go door to door in those areas that are direly, immediately impacted, but this allows us on the peripherals to drive up and down those streets and notify people on a much broader scale. Our sheriff's helicopters also have it if we needed to use it, but if you hear that European-style well, that's our high-low, and you're in an evacuation order area. So Genesis Protect, public facing, it's free, by the way, paid for regionally by Office of Emergency Services for the county. So this is the Border 2 fire, I believe. The red evacuation order is Otay Mountain. So this is just kind of a reference picture what it's going to look like during a wildfire on Genesis Protect. You can see Otay Mountains in red. Well, if that was your community, you would be in zone 2543. Where you would reside would be in an evacuation order area. When we have an evacuation order area, it's almost always touched by an evacuation warning area, letting you know that it's probably, you need to be ready, and if you have the ability to, especially in certain communities, you need to go ahead, and I would make plans and go ahead and leave early. Activate your emergency plan. This is down in Eastlake, as you remember, Otay Mountain, and you can see the golden warning areas, and the blue is an advisory. They've even just gone beyond that and said, hey, if the wind conditions continue, those blue advisories could eventually turn into warnings, but be ready. I think that is one of the mantras of tonight is be prepared, be ready. Leave early. Here it also gives you evacuation points. One of the evacuation points is circled in red there, the Edwards Theater. The other one's off the screen. It gives you traffic control points. There's a lot more information now that we have at our fingertips that we just didn't have before. You can save up to 5 of those in Genesis Protect. Maybe I want to save my home in Genesis Protect, my kid's school, my parents' house. You don't have to physically be in that zone to get that notification if it's one of your saved markers. If you're in a zone that is having a zone status change, it will notify you. So that's one of the beauties of Genesis Protect, public-facing side. And again, in this one, the red one is for evacuation orders. The Sheriff's Department has an extremely unique relationship with CAL FIRE. What we call ASTRIA stands for Aerial Support to Regional Enforcement Agencies. We're partnered with CAL FIRE since 2005. We have 4 firefighting helicopters and for fire rescue, etc. We have a sheriff's pilot that flies in this instance, we have 3 Bell 205s, a sheriff's pilot partnered with a CAL FIRE captain and a CAL FIRE crew that they can use to do a myriad of things, whether they insert them on the ground, put them in hard-to-reach locations, perform rescues with our hoist-equipped aircraft. And Astria was funded, it's a regional asset. So no matter where they're going, whether it's on a patrol mission, they also have 4 patrol helicopters, or a fire mission to assist putting out fires, it's at no expense to those allied jurisdictions. So again, it's a unique, one-of-a-kind thing where we partner law enforcement and fire with sheriff's helicopters to actually fight fires. I think we learned in the aftermath of 03 the importance of aerial assets and getting on top of fires quickly. In 05, we started doing that with CAL FIRE here out of Gillespie Field. We just more recently have a newer helicopter, a Bell 412 twin-engine helicopter. Again, allows us to fly a little longer. The redundancy of the twin engine gives us the ability, when we're hovering over water, should something happen with that second engine, another featured level of safety. Justin, did you want to talk about the...
So animal evacuation's a little more nuanced than humans because oftentimes you'll be evacuated, you're cut off from your home, and your pets are stuck inside. So we understand that you can't always evacuate your own animals, but again, if you have enough warning ahead of time, again, we really recommend that you self-evacuate. Even if you don't have a fully stocked go bag, companion animals, if you need food, supplies, anything like that, we can get all that to you later. Usually we'll have a cache set up somewhere nearby. You can come by. If you're staying somewhere where you can't keep your pets, you could drop your pets off and we can bring them to our shelter to shelter them too. But like I said, practice livestock, practice loading your animals in and out of trailers if they're not used to it. Also, if you are an animal owner and you have neighbors who own animals too, connect with them and let them know, hey, I have a horse here. If you know other horse owners and you know they're at work, say, if you can grab their horse for them and haul it out for them, that would be, really, really helpful and beneficial to them. Like I said, don't worry about stocking supplies for long-term pet evacs, just enough for a few days. We'll usually get bombarded with donations and get really, really large donations of pet food and supplies later on. So if you need them, you can come to any of our cache spots and just get whatever you need. We do have like I mentioned before, an emergency response team. It's about 70 members. It's mostly volunteers. And they're trained, most of them are trained pretty heavily, or they have a lot of experience with handling animals and large animals as well. They're also trained to go on properties and assess whether, one, it's safe to evacuate your pets, if it's safe to get a trailer in and turn it around, load the animals and leave, or if it just looks like it's a safe place to shelter your animals in place. We also have a technical rope rescue team as well, so if your animal gets injured in the emergency, if it's safe, we can do a rope rescue, hoist them up, load them in a trailer. We will usually always prioritize sheltering in place whenever possible. So you may be separated from your large animals and want them taken to an off-site shelter, take them to a large animal sheltering site. If at all possible, we can shelter your animals in place at your home. We would prefer to do that. Usually what we'll do in situations after the fire's over, if there's still a long-standing roadblock, a long-standing evacuation order, we'll have teams go in and they'll feed your animals, care for them, give them water. We have water tenders. We'll bring water for all of your critters if you need them. We'll connect with animal owners and get keys to their homes if their dogs and cats are still inside. We'll go in, feed them, check on them, do welfare checks, and then come back and give you your keys back. We'll only evacuate animals that are in immediate danger that can be handled, loaded, and evacuated safely and quickly. So if we go on a scene and we talk about those horses that are not accustomed to loading up, if we give it our best shot and we can't do it, just for the sake of the safety of our people, they might have to leave the animals behind, unfortunately. So yeah, evacuations are the last resort for animal owners who are stuck outside roadblocks. We'll prioritize those people who were separated from their animals during the evacuation order. After that, we'll help evacuate other animals. But you can contact us. You can either call Sheriff's Dispatch. They'll give the information to us, or you can call our animal control dispatch and we'll put calls in for service. At the very least, we'll be able to do welfare checks and that sort of thing on your animals if they're stuck behind.
So repopulation. So evacuation, I think everyone gets where we're coming for that. Repopulation, we start planning for that very shortly after we actually implement evacuation protocols. It's a standardized procedure. As you can see, there's a number of entities there. We want to make sure that the community is safe before we allow everyone back in there, and it's a very vetted and thought out decision. We don't want to keep the community out of their residences any longer than is necessary, but we need to make sure there's a level of safety before we allow open the roads back up to the public. There's a layered approach. We can start with residents only and tier it from there, but we definitely use that standardized. You can see our checklist here, making sure everyone has buy-in from our public safety utilities, all of those things, no downed wires across the roads, etc. We've at least driven through certain communities. There's no gas leaks as best we can tell and things of that nature. Repopulation, one of the things that our dispatch call centers used to get blown up about, the calls for into there, they wanted information. When can I go home? Well, the beauty of Genesis Protect now will tell you. You could be, there's a fire here in Olivenhain, and you could be at a family member's house in Eastlake down in Chula Vista, and you're sitting on the couch watching TV, and your cell phone chimes, boom, we just had a zone status change out of evacuation order or warning, and I'm now clear to go home. You weren't doing anything. You weren't even watching your phone. So that is this technology at work for you. That reduces the call volume on our call centers on the front end and the back end, allowing those public safety dispatchers to truly field the calls, cut down on the wait time for those individuals who are under duress, who might need rescued from their home, who might need a pet rescue. So all of these information sources are out there that we're putting at your disposal. Please use them. There's so much information out there that everyone is sharing, and especially on these public safety ones, Genesis Protect, Alert SD, all the others. I'm going to turn it back over to Marie for additional resources.
I want to say thank you to everyone. I know we have eaten into some of that Q&A time, but as you can tell, my team members and I are very passionate about talking to you and making sure that this community is prepared for and can respond to any disaster emergency. So here are some additional resources that you can tap into. One of the things I want to share is that this slide deck will be shared with Sarah, so she'll make sure that it's up on the website. But just kind of reviewing some of the things that we talked about tonight, you know, starting with that defensible space, home hardening, rolling into the emergency preparedness, talking about, and we've talked about, you know, the large animal evacuations, other considerations that you might have that are unique to you or you and your family, and then also that evacuation. I cannot stress this enough, that just making sure that you have those tools. You're registered for Alert San Diego. You've heard us mention this several times. You've downloaded Genesis Protect. I was so grateful that Lieutenant Davis was able to come out here tonight and present as part of our team, given his background and what he did in helping, being part of that team that developed that, just that amazing tool, Genesis Protect, that we have available. And you can see that last piece is don't wait. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah, and I'm going to let her kind of take care of the Q&A piece.
We have a hand for everybody because I think this was an amazing presentation. Thank you. So Jeff and I discussed how to handle the Q&A, and we agreed on some ground rules. First of all, you have to use the microphone, or the people at home are not going to be able to hear your question. Second of all, please give your name and your Olivenhain neighborhood so that the first responder representatives know where the issues are that you're discussing. We won't tolerate any kind of disrespect. Things can get kind of heated in Olivenhain, as some of you know, and no politics, local or national. Please, only one question per person. There's probably not going to be time at the end. I was going to say you can ask another. And please pay attention to the questions that have already been asked so we don't waste time on duplicate questions.
So we also have a ton online. We have over 80 people streaming. So I have 20 questions in the hopper. I'm going to go fast for all of the presenters. And we'll come into in-person questions as well. If you can stand on the blue line and go back and make a line. You guys ready?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to try to stage them to people as well. Okay, I think this one probably is for Chief. This is from Molly. Our 2-lane roads are charming, but reality is that we need to create safer easements to evacuate. We talk a lot about creating a defensible space around our homes. The same should go for our roads. The easements have mature eucalyptus along Manchester and Rancho Santa Fe Road. Can you advise on that? Oh.
So I can speak to that. Like the person said, the 2-lane roads, the way they are designed already, are existing non-conforming. Depending on when they were built, that's the standard that they were built to. Going beyond that is something that legally I don't think we have the ability to require. They are public right-of-way. That's something that could be discussed in the future as a possibility. But as they are right now, it's existing non-conforming. New roads and new developments that are built are required to meet the standards of today. The California state minimum is 20 feet clear. In Encinitas, we actually have an ordinance that's higher than that, which is 24 feet in the very high fire hazard severity zone. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, we'll go to in-person.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for you guys being here and for lending us your expertise. My name is Charles, and I'm in the Windsor Estates, I guess, neighborhood. There have been a couple, at least two garage fires recently in our neighborhood or nearby one. And I was speaking with a firefighter friend of mine, and he said that most garage fires are started by improper battery charging. I wondered if you could speak to that, and I wanted to make sure other people are aware.
Yeah, so 80% of all of our garage fires right now are caused by some kind of lithium-ion battery. Same thing with trash trucks, which is people throwing away their lithium-ion batteries and then getting crushed. Couple things with that. One is a damaged battery. Sometimes you drop it, whether it's a DeWalt battery, an e-bike battery, something that you don't know is damaged, and then you put it on the charger, you walk away, 3 days later, it could finally decide it wants to catch on fire. So look for damaged batteries. One of the rule of thumbs we have, if you've dropped something from your waist high when it comes to a battery, then you might want to watch it, make sure that it's safe. Charge it outside, make sure that it's not going to combust and then get your home on fire. The other thing is a lot of people buy aftermarket chargers and they start using those, which will heat up your battery, and what we call a thermal runaway will kick in, and then now the battery's on fire, catching everything else on fire. There's a lot of worry about electric vehicles out there. Those do catch on fire. We're seeing, again, aftermarket charging, not using, we'll say, a Tesla charger to charge a Tesla, or they'll have some kind of damage. They ran over something, they pulled in their garage, didn't check, make sure everything was okay, and then some kind of fire will happen because of that. So it is something we're working on. It is a problem that we have not solved yet, especially on the electric vehicle side. So it takes 300,000 gallons of water, or up to 300,000 gallons of water, just to put an electric vehicle out. Where does that water go? It's now a hazardous material. Does it go into our ocean? So we're debating, how do we put this fire out? What is the exposure? Where is the thick, black, deadly smoke going? So we're trying to mitigate those, and we're still trying to come up with some of those solutions.
Can we go rapid fire now, Chief? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Ready? This is from Ed. I have a bare wood OSB and lumber attic. I've considered spraying the entire attic with intumescent fire retardant coating to prevent this. This is very expensive. Would you guys recommend this?
That's not something we can recommend necessarily, but it's not a bad option. The thing with intumescent paints is that they're aftermarket product that's not done during the manufacturer process, which means they're only going to last a couple years, which you have to keep reapplying them. So if that's something they want to do and they want to keep reapplying it, then that's definitely something good. If it's the attic space, I would recommend the vents, because you're going to eliminate things coming into that space from the outside, which means you wouldn't have to keep doing the treatment.
I got another one for you. From Yigal. Spooks Canyon is loaded with brush. Chief and I were playing out there when we were kids. Could you recommend brush abatement in the area?
For where?
Spooks Canyon.
So yeah, if they want to put in, and I meant to say this earlier, I don't know if I mentioned it. If you have a particular issue that you want to report to us, the best way to do that is to use the My Encinitas app. That is once you do that, it gets filtered down and then goes to the right department. If someone just emails or call us, we can't necessarily just go see all of them. When all the complaints are coming in after Palisades, we fielded, I don't know how many complaints in January after the Palisades fire. But information is just dumping into us, and we have to verify it, but there's only, including myself, there's 3 of us for Encinitas. So there's not a lot of power for us to go out and handle 40 vegetation complaints in the day. So the best thing for people to do if they have an issue is to go to the My Encinitas app and then put it through there, and then we can address it.
Okay, I think you get some really... you want to answer?
Okay, I mean, yeah. Once the complaints come to us, then that's part of the vetting process. Is we're looking at like who owns the property, and then if it's city owned, then we get public works on it, or depending on Valserino, it's county maintained. So there's just different rules, but yeah, still do the same thing, and we'll vet through that whole process and do what we can do.
I think you get reprieve, Jordan. This one is from Nancy outside of Olivenhain. Basically, in terms of preparedness, how can people who are disabled move and get resources during an emergency?
I think one of the best resources that people can tap into is, there's a few. There's 211, so that's one of the resources that I had up on that last screen, so you can kind of tap into that. There's also, through the County of San Diego, there's access and functional needs information up on the county. So I will also have my contact information, because depending on what that need is, there might be some other resources people can tap into.
Yeah, we'll have all the slides on olivenhain.org after this. I'm going to breeze through these. Claudia had some concerns about brush. Once again, submit through my Encinitas app. Okay, Suzanne asked, there's a new 6-acre property up for sale, the old Grand Jetta, or the current Grand Jettas, with a possible multifamily consideration. After the LA fires, how concerned are we about more density, especially with Goodson being developed? How can a full firehouse be considered for? Could a firehouse be considered for that property? I think that's maybe a chief question.
I mean, with all the helicopter talks, I would like that to be my helicopter pad, and if we can get a helicopter, that'd be amazing. No, so density is always something that's on our mind. You know, we're looking at developments now in the future, and we're planning our public safety resources to pace with that, right? So we know there's an increase in population, there's a mobility issue that's coming, and our fire department, the sheriff's department, through city council and our engineering and our development services, we understand that that's going to cause a burden. And what we're looking at is what are those resources that we need. You know, Olivenhain, we're working on a new fire station, a Type 1 engine. We know that with the different buildings and structures that could be going upward, we might have to look at our truck and how we staff that. So with that new property coming up, I haven't actually heard that it's actually going to be any development there for housing. But even then, you know, we'll look at that. We'll see what the effects are on our streets and our evacuations, and then through what kind of fire codes we can put onto the development, we can make it a shelter-in-place home or development. There's a lot of things that we can do to help make sure that it's safe for all of us.
Question for
If I could just add to that real quick.
Keep going.
With all the development that's going on in the county and the entire state, the rules that have come down might be different for certain aspects of development, but not for the fire department and the fire codes or safety. None of our codes or requirements are changed or not required. So yes, there's spots that maybe change zoning or what have you for other reasons, but the safety aspect of all those buildings still has to meet the minimum safety standards, just like any other building built anywhere. There's construction, sprinklers, hydrant distances, all that stuff is evaluated for when those places come in. So I just wanted to put that information out there.
Sorry, I'm going through here. Brush evacuation, a lot of questions around that. Once again, we answered that. I think Chief just addressed the full-time fire station in Encinitas, or sorry, in Olivenhain. If you want to talk to that for one more second, I just lost my.
Yeah, there's
Hit the wrong
some
button.
competing factors right now. I mean, I know you guys probably heard we had to shut down Fire Station 1, and now that has kind of jumped up on the priority list. It is our busiest station with the least geographical area. It's west of the 5 freeway, which is important to us because of the train tracks, west of the train tracks. So there's a need there. And then, you know, as we start planning that, we're looking at how we can get a fire station in the future there as well. So I wish it was tomorrow, but I know Bruce is trying to help me with this, and the whole city council is. So we're supported. Bruce, did you want to say something to that?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Yeah, Bruce Ehlers. I'm mayor in Encinitas now. Two things. One, the new lot down, or the lot down here that's coming on the market, is not zoned for multiple family housing. First and foremost, I think half of it is floodplain. So that I don't know where that rumor is starting, but yeah. So number two is fire stations. As the chief said, Fire Station 1 got condemned right before, what, a year ago, roughly. So they're out of it completely, and they're double bunking over in Leucadia. So we got to get that emergency fixed. We're going down that path. But in parallel with that, we are also, I've been working closely with the chief. We're looking at other lots around here. Years ago, we sold the lot we had out here. We're looking very near there. But this could be another possibility too. We don't know yet. We're going to go through those plans. Obviously, from a funding standpoint, we've got to get Fire Station 1 planned temporary. So we just approved to put a temporary fire station on Pacific View, over in the corner, not to affect the building, but it's a good place. We own the land. We get the no rent, so it's kind of nice. We'll have a temporary facility there. I keep talking to the chief about, hey, when we're done and we get the one built down there, can I take the temporary facility, tow it out here, and if I find land out here? So we're working on those plans right now.
My turn? Bruce, I just texted you. Tina saw an announcement on Instagram this morning about that parcel. And there's a developer that's been selected and is offering it, and it says as multi-housing, rent or sale. Okay, good.
Sorry, yeah. So it's not zoned. There is a state law, there are two of them called AB 2011 and SB 6 that can, in certain situations, let them build commercial, multifamily. However, it would be at a prevailing rate, wage rate, which is usually about double the cost and usually discourages most people. So remember, realtors will sometimes say things that aren't necessarily fact. So
now, my question is just about the Goodson project. From the plan, it was stated that those gates on Rancho Santa Fe Road would be controlled by the fire department and would never be open for anything other than emergency access. I just want to make sure that's still the case and will always be.
Yeah, those are for emergencies only.
Excellent. I think this is for Jordan, but can residents schedule an evaluation of their property by your staff?
Great question. The short answer is yes, if you're in the very high fire hazard severity zone.
Gotcha.
If you're not, we'll try to give you information out. But like I said, our staff is very limited, so we want to prioritize those areas as well as all the other duties that we're assigned with. But we have the flyer, a bunch of information on our website, and you can always call us or email us, and we'll give you as much information as you want.
Exactly. Another question from Kevin. Is there an app or GIS tool from the city that aids in locating the closest fire hydrant to your home?
Public facing, I'm not actually sure.
Email Jordan.
I'm sorry?
Email Jordan.
Email Jordan, yeah.
Perfect.
No.
Fire prevention is EncinitasCA.gov.
I know we have them for maps that we easily see on our end, but I'm not sure public facing that they're there.
Okay. The next one, I don't know if anyone wants to comment if there's a pump you can recommend for putting in your swimming pool, and will fire help?
I can't recommend an actual pump. I know that we use what's called a Mach 5 pump on our engines that we'll throw in the pool if we get there and we need to use our own. But there's plenty of pumps out there. The higher GPM, the better.
Gotcha. From Dean, do fire retardant spray work?
Yes, for a limited amount of time, and then you have to reapply, like I said, for the interior of the attic. And it stains too.
Gotcha. Okay, from Raul, I'm going to read this because this is a lengthy question. Has there been any more traffic simulation studies for the time to evacuate Olivenhain? Zones 1 through 5 has more than 2,500 addresses with 5,000 population, including wildlife, all feeding into single Rancho Santa Fe Road with the Double L Ranch. Is there any traffic control plans beyond what we've been discussed, Chief?
It's an interesting question because would it matter? Are we going to lose population out here and tell you guys you can't have cars? Probably not, right? I know that a residential street can move about 400 to 600 cars per hour. And once we get to Encinitas Boulevard, it bumps up to about 1,500 cars per hour. So that is not going to change with the streets. Now, once we get the sheriff out there and we start controlling intersection, those numbers start increasing. We can get on Rancho Santa Fe Road about 1,200 cars per hour is what the FEMA would say we could move. So when you're looking at, if we're doing zoned phases, I believe if we did everybody all at once, we could do everybody out of here in about 8 hours. All at once though, right? It gets better when we do zone phased evacuations. So when we start moving people in certain zones first, it frees up a little bit more traffic. We are going to control the intersections at Lacadia, Rancho Santa Fe, Encinitas Boulevard, Lacadia, Rancho Santa Fe. We're going to use other avenues through Village Park, through the Morning Sun Gate is what we call it, by Deganio. So that we have multiple exits once we get there. But the traffic studies, we can do as many traffic studies as we want, but it's only as good as you listen to us. We're going to put bags over the stop signs. So we're going to change the road conditions in the first place. So we'll be able to do a lot more volume when it comes to evacuations.
Perfect. It's like a city council. One here and 2 more online.
Just a follow-up to the additional development. My understanding is there's another project that's pending or coming up on Manchester called the Preserve. Not sure exactly how many homes. I think it was something like 35. And that would be all flowing out onto one of the evacuation routes, which, as we know, is a very narrow 2-lane road. So I'm just throwing it out there as another thing that I don't know how you guys look at that.
Yeah, the hard thing is there's no objective standards for us to measure on evacuation times. So if we came up and said, you cannot develop, they will use their lawyers, sue us, and say, what are you basing this off of? And there is no objective standard for us to bring, and then we would lose. So the best thing we can do is take the fire code and create the safest place we can. And then just like the Encinitas Boulevard Apartments over here, the Goodson Project, that is built in a way that we can not let people leave and have them shelter in place while we evacuate. And then when there's breaks in the evacuation, we can let them out of their complex there, right? So there are things we can do to create a safer evacuation, but we can't just say no to development. I can say we're looking into stricter ordinances coming up here. It is the fire code year where we look at all of our fire codes. And even before the Palisades fires happen, we've been discussing all these ordinances, all the fire codes, and how we want to adopt them. And we are looking to be more restrictive with the ordinances that we are looking at.
This should be an easy one, and then we'll have another in person. Kevin asks if you would activate CERT to help with traffic flow.
So we would if we had an active CERT program at the moment, but we don't. And the reason for that is we're revamping our CERT program. It used to fall under FEMA and the state. We're creating a new program that falls under a volunteer program that the city controls. Now, one of the downfalls of the CERT program before was you could only use them if it was a training or an emergency activation, and those were the two caveats, right? They're only covered if they're under those two situations. Under the volunteer program, we can use them for a lot more. The emergency manager can use them for a lot more. Prevention can use them to maybe do defensible space inspections. So CERT is coming. We're just not there yet with the revamp of what it looks like.
A lot of us live on private road easements and private roads. Not all of our neighbors are as diligent about clearing those easements. Given that the fire department has said that they're not going to necessarily serve those houses because it's not safe for fire personnel, et cetera, what can be done to save other community members' homes that are behind these homes? This vegetation.
I'll first reiterate what Jordan said. You have to work with your neighbors. I mean, that's the most important part. I know that sometimes that's hard, and I'm going to turn it over to Jordan now.
Thanks, Chief. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be your best avenue. I know you're in a very unique situation because we've talked before in the past. Then maybe there could be some agreement where you offer assistance in some way, or or try to go a different direction and improve maybe an access on the other side. I'm not sure exactly. Like I said, you're in a very unique situation, and when the codes went through last time, I know you guys are outspoken in some things that you said, which actually made us provide more code language for the gates. So your input was valued and then actually applied so that we could help in some way.
Thanks.
But a lot of that comes down to property rights, and we don't have necessarily the legality behind us to force people to do certain things.
So just to sort of add on to that, Rancho Santa Fe does require clearing for private road easements that serve other homes. And they've provided that they send out that notice to residents all the time, so there certainly can't be a legal impediment to enforcing those standards. And I do think that the problem extends far beyond just that parcel that you're aware of, because I think that many, many community members are experiencing the same thing or have dangerous trees with limbs over, and we know people in previous fires and evacuations who have had limbs come down, and they have not been able to leave, or at least not leave in a timely fashion. So thank you.
Yeah, I think us looking at the new fire codes and the more restrictive ordinances is going to help too. So we might have a little bit more of an idea how to help later on. So just as a quick plug, real quick, the interim city manager, Jennifer Campbell, just texted me because she's still watching. Thank you.
Good job,
Said
Chief.
that the fire hydrant locations are on the website under GIS. GIS mapping application shows San Diego Water District and Olivenhain Municipal Water District hydrants.
Thank you, Jennifer. Wow, what service. Okay, the last question, I believe, for all you guys. Joel asks, are the recommended brush and mitigation removal goals for the overall city and Olivenhain being met? What's the plan, if not to having them being met?
The overall goals, the vegetation management for the roadsides is a relatively new program. That's going to take some time and money just because there's a lot of vegetation. Given what Marie said with climatic things like last year, we get heavy rains and then everything grows. And then the next year we get to cut it, which is why we always reiterate the 0 to 5 and then people's defensible space around their homes. The closer sections are the most important. Farther out from that is manageable, but it's not always ideal. Are they being met generally? I would say general, yes, but we are, like I said, resources are stretched thin. We are complaint driven. So if there's information that you have on something that we don't know about, please give that to us, and then we can do our job.
Yeah, I love how you say complaint driven because you're going to get a lot of complaints now. So one of the vegetation management is really one of our big frustrations too, right? We have county land in here. They do provide vegetation management, but when you look at the 100-foot defensible space, that is from your roof line. It's not from your property line. So You know, we show up to a lot of people's homes that says, look, here's my property line, and there's 100 feet, and that's not where it starts. So there might only be 30 feet that they have to go from your property line, because that is 100 feet from your home. So just know that we have that limitation. There's biologists, environmentalists out there that talk about certain types of species that are breeding. We have what might look dead to you is actually dormant. So, you know, there's a lot of these competing factors when we go to look for vegetation management. And if we could just go take a chainsaw and create a 100-foot of defensible space, we would do that. But we're balancing the environment, the way that our community looks, and then also the safety on top of that. Now, we obviously lean towards that safety side. But if we were the only ones making the decision, that would be easy, right? So we have to build these relationships with the county, with the environmental groups, the biologists, and we're trying to figure out ways to make sure that we're safe, but still get them with that buy-in to help with creating that space. So, last question.
Steve Lloyd, I live down on Pepper Tree Lane. What do you think about mounting sprinklers on the top of roofs?
If you're going to use a pump from your pool, I agree. If you're going to take it off of our municipal water district, all you're doing is robbing pressure from the rest of everybody else with the hydrants. And that's what happened with the Palisades, right? A lot of people use sprinklers. If they burn, you look like the Bellagio, because now you just have a geyser coming up from your lawn. If you're going to put them on your roof, I know there were some people out there that said, oh, I saved my home in the Palisades because I put a sprinkler on my roof. None of that water hit the roof at 90-mile-an-hour winds. I'm just letting you know. I can tell you personally, and when I was on the floor, I would spend most of my summers up north fighting wildland fires. That was the thing I liked to do. It's fun to get dirty, fun to hang out with the guys and work hard, right? I can tell you times where I would open a hose line to the fire and the water would never hit that fire. And that is the 150 PSI, 200 gallons in a minute. So when you put a sprinkler on your home with 90-mile-an-hour winds, none of that water is hitting your roof. It's just robbing it from everybody else.
So, sorry, background chemical engineer. Why not just put a drip line along the top so it flows down the roof?
Okay, so with 90-mile-an-hour winds, relative humidity at 10 or less, and 90-degree weather, do you think the water is going to stay there? Or is it going to evaporate?
It's going to flow down the
pretty
roof.
quick.
It'll flow down the roof. It's going fast enough.
You could try it, but again, you're just taking pressure away from the hydrants.
Unless you've got a pool.
Yeah. If you do it by the pool, then you're fine, yeah. So.
Okay, thank you.
That is it. Thank you all.
Thank you. Ron, our resident photographer, would like a photo of Bruce and me with all of you. Huh?
Bruce, photo.